Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wizards Council. I'm John.
I'm Matt.
I'm Abe.
Alrighty, so I've volunteered to run a campaign for my friends, but I'm not really sure what goes into it or the kind of story I want to run. Is there something that I should be considering?
Yes.
How do I make the story side of stuff work?
Yes.
Is it hard?
Always.
Yes.
Softball that one up to the crowd. All right.
One of us has got to be soft. Keep
No,
the averages
it's
down.
hard. It's hard always.
That's for the two of us.
I might need to see a medical doctor.
It has been more than 5 years.
And not just about my voice.
Help me.
There is no help for you, John. You chose this life.
I know. All right. So,
So one of the biggest things to think about when you're
there you go.
volunteering to run a campaign is about what kind of narrative style you're going to go with in your campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because for me, that's a huge driving force about how I even think about the campaign in general, is what style of narrative am I going with, what length narrative am I going with. It's very important to kind of determining everything else that happens.
D&D is a storytelling game.
Tabletop.
Like, yeah. I mean, true. Not just D&D, but D&D and other storytelling games are, like I said, that's what they're there for. Yeah, I know. I repeated myself. Deal with it, guys.
I'll edit it out.
So, just edits me out of the podcast.
I would never do that.
I see you giving him the eyes. That's not kosher.
It's just one X click. It's gone.
So yeah, we'll talk about narratives, the narrative kind of intensities that you can go with.
Yeah,
And,
narrative styles.
Yep, and I think that's why we're here, right? You're here to tell a narrative. That's a huge part of the game.
Yeah.
And like, not all of us, but I think that's something that very recently D&D has finally like acknowledged, recognized, and grown into that, and it's coming out. I mean, the 5th edition supports that a lot more about supporting the narrative and the role play. So
Yeah,
I think this is a really important thing to kind of like get in your head when you're writing your campaigns. And this should be a good way to kind of frame it. Think how you want to tell your story. What's going to fit you best.
Yeah. It also goes into a lot of the prep work you do. Like how much effort, or not effort, but so how much work do you need to do for each session, and how much of it can you prep, and how much do you have to keep doing on the fly?
All on the fly.
Oh my God. I feel that.
That's what happened to me my last session.
That's what happened to me my last session.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And John was in both those groups, guys.
Yeah.
It's his fault.
Yeah.
John does it all.
Alright, so we're going to talk.
Ruins everything.
The way we categorize these, what we're talking about today, is the narrative slider from short or no narrative to long length narrative. That's kind of the slider we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first section of this is the no narrative section. This is the classic dungeon crawl.
This is what D&D was built on.
Yes, this is the mega dungeon where there is no overarching story driving you down there.
Mm-hmm.
You're just kicking down doors, clearing rooms, getting loot.
The dungeon crawl.
Exactly.
The hack and slash.
Now, that's not to say you don't have to have absolutely no narrative in it. It could be as much as like, there's a deep dungeon that you need to go into, and monsters just keep flowing out of it.
There's 99 levels of hell.
You need to go and fight your way through. It's sort of like Diablo, or the
Yes.
Diablo-esque games,
Yes.
where it's just like, yeah, there's some narrative there, but it's not why we're here.
This is a game that's going to be picked up by a lot of people who heard about D&D but grew up playing video games. This is kind of where your mind goes to when you think of this. And this is this is fun. It's super enjoyable. I love these kinds of games. I like being able to just, like, sure, there's a million other games that can do combat simulations in their own ways, but I like the rule set of D&D. I like the feel of it, and this is a dungeon crawl's a way if you don't want to put in all the prep work into writing a story, or you just want to fuck around with the mechanics. This is an awesome way to do that and have a good time with some friends.
Yeah, and when it comes to the dungeon crawl-esque campaign, it could just be like an every couple months kind of thing. maybe you actually have the players with the mindset of like, we are going to crawl to the bottom of this dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
There will be like 5 to 10 fights per floor, and there's 99 levels. We're going the whole way down.
We're going deep.
We're going deep.
Which kudos. That's
Dedication.
impressive. That is very impressive.
Well, that's how D&D was in the beginning.
Yes,
Yeah.
You every DM had their mega dungeon, and that's what you ran most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And you could have, yeah. I think that dungeon crawls are kind of how I got started. Even 4th edition was my starting campaign, and that particular edition of Dungeons and Dragons, very combat-y, very tactical. It was delightful. I had a lot of fun with that.
It was built in the rise of the MMO era.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it did feel like an MMO, that's for sure.
But yeah, in that regard, in that very baseline, you can have just no narrative. Guys, we're going into a dungeon here. I'm going to keep throwing things. And that's probably the most prep work, like the prep work style that you're going to have to do is coming up with combats.
Yep.
And
Good
constantly
maps.
designing combats that, and they can range from fairly easy to very complex. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest puzzle and hurdle you're going to have as a DM running that is coming up with all of those combats, all of those puzzles, and all of those things, so that way they just keep hurtling past it.
Yeah. There's a lot of little things you can do in there. You got to think of traps, special things, special actions, layer actions. You want to like really consider everything that's in there that they're going to come across. Like
Loot.
Yeah, the rewards are going to be key there. Make sure they're getting scaling from that. Like, there's a lot that can go into thinking about how to make this thing fun and engaging. Or at the end of the day, you can just pull open the random loot tables from the DMG and just roll on them every time they finish a fight. But think of how you want to space that, and like,
there's a lot of.
It's a good time.
There's a ton of It can be very interesting, challenging tactically.
Yeah.
But narratively speaking, almost nothing. Unless your DM is, you want to put like background lore into the temple. So maybe you're not telling a direct story, but you're telling like a side story through books or something like
a
that.
Dark Souls kind of idea.
Yeah,
like codex entries you find like Skyrim and stuff.
What do they call that? There's a term for that kind of storytelling.
Indirect storytelling.
Yeah, indirect storytelling.
It's the backbone of Dark Souls.
Yep.
And sort of like take a lot of the narrative out of it, and now you're in
I never played much Destiny.
To pull like a more modern reference, it's SAO, but you take away all that narrative. You have 100 floors to go to, and you got one life to live.
Sword Art Online. Okay. Yeah, that was whenever that was the first thing that came to my mind. We were like, Mega Dungeon, like Sword Art Online. You have to get to the top to beat the game. And it's just a big old MMO combat thing.
Yeah.
Except Sword Art Online has a ton of cool story in it.
But, it's like, oh, cool, you get to a new floor. Now you have shops that sell stuff. You have loot. You can discard that loot, get new loot.
A reasonable amount of story.
Yeah, well, it doesn't need to. I mean, you followed the story in the show, but in a playing setting, it's like, cool, I have a new town on the next floor. I have a new town on the next floor. I have a new town on the next floor.
Well, clearly it should be like Sword Art Online abridged.
It should be. The abridged version is better. I said it. I meant it. Come at me.
All right, so that is what we would call the lowest on the narrative slider.
Yep.
A 1, you might say.
A 1 out of maybe 4.
Possibly.
Well then, let's talk
Joke's
about
on you guys. We only prepped for suckers.
right, we got lazy. We cut it out at 4. So the next thing we'll talk about then is a 2 on this scale here, or something that I would say is more episodic in nature here, where you got a lot of little stories. And the campaign type that I think best fits this is sandbox, which you've probably heard me say at least once or twice before in this podcast. I'm sure somewhere in here I've said it. Or if I haven't, you're going to hear me say it a lot more.
Have you?
Have I? So, sandbox is the idea that, so when you're thinking of a narrative for a sandbox, generally you're thinking of like that episodic kind of feel. Sort of like Firefly is a really good example of this. Help me out. What are some other like TV shows?
Star Trek.
Star Trek. Those are like your big ones where each episode isn't really related to the other one. Like there's not much. Like maybe there's some character development, but the there's no tie between each of those stories. You're going to a new planet, discovering a new thing.
It's like in the case of like Star Wars, sci-fi. Think of all the sci-fi movies. Don't necessarily the chain like Alien 1 through 3, but you're watching Alien.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
Then you might go to Predator.
Yep.
Okay,
And then you go to Planet Dead Space, and then you'll go to Planet Arrival. I'm trying to think of non-horror things. My brain's failing me right now.
Well, there's also a lot of sci-fi horror. It's pretty.
It's pretty
I love
pretty
those
far out there.
things, though.
But each one is its own individual thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jason X.
Ooh, there you go.
Jason X, don't compliment him on that. Oh, God.
That was a deep pull. That's what I was actually referring to, and I'm like, ooh, that was a good one.
Deep pull.
Well pull. A good pull.
Oh, my
go
God.
deep.
Yeah. Oh.
You said that
If
already.
only you could.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. So Sandbox, when preparing for that, I don't want to get too in depth about that, but you really need to think ahead of time of just getting a large variety of episodes or at least locations set in your mind there. When I made my Sandbox world, I had like 27, 30-ish different little ideas and stories. It was just like a sentence or two for each of them. Nothing to get overwhelmed at the beginning, but enough that if that I had some prep work already done, so that way if the players said next week they want to go there, I didn't have to create something from scratch. I'd already thought ahead for that. And one of the cool things about or important things about a sandbox is the story, the narrative is not driven by the sense that you have an overarching thing going on that's dragging them along. The story is driven by what the players want to do in it. And the players need to make sure that they, at the beginning of this thing, accept that they need to have goals, ambitions, wants, desires, and they're the ones who are going to be pushing the story by picking things to go to, jumping off into the black, getting interested in politics there, going on, hiring themselves off as like mercenary crews, pirating, whatever it is. Do whatever the hell you want, right? And then do it. See where it goes. And then the story will kind of follow along. There's stuff for you to explore as a player. Know that when you're in a sandbox, the DM has done a lot of work preparing places for you to be, and go enjoy the fun little stories that are going to happen there. Enjoy it. Come back to your home base afterwards, and then go off to the next location. And you might find a deeper story if that's what you're interested in. You can move away from this, but at its core, Sandbox is going to be episodes. They might have some 2-parters or 3-parters, but they usually don't last for a year.
Yeah.
And by episodes, you're talking like not necessarily singular sessions, but 3 or 4 session kind of storylines.
Between 1 and like 3,
Okay.
1 and 4 is what I think is reasonable. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable. If you have longer to play, you might be able to get 8 hours. You might be able to finish an entire like episode basically, and you can do a bunch of little ones like that. If you have something that you want to do that's a bit more complex, then make it a little bit longer.
Mm.
It really depends what your players do. That's what I found.
Well, of course, yeah.
When I first started writing stuff, I was like, oh man, I hope I have enough stuff for today. I did it, and then 5 sessions later, they finally finished what I did that first day. I'm like, oh, well, neat. That was much longer than I expected.
Yeah, that's
Not a bad thing.
It's the prerogative of the player to like. Oh, I want to keep talking to this person. I didn't have that. Okay, yeah. That's a good point, player A. That was good. Yeah. That's what we were thinking about too in this complication.
Yeah, I want to teleport to a random city and talk to an NPC that just got named
Exactly.
for 20 minutes.
Right?
Indeed.
I have things I can talk about, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Guess what? I need tea. Let's go get tea. Wait a second. Tea? Why don't you just have tea in your house? Why are you traveling to get tea? Ruffians.
Ran out. I ran out.
Right. On my husband because he brokers in tea. Yeah.
Oversharing.
What?
Oversharing.
So would it be apt to describe it as like the genre, like a bunch of you could pretty much watch multiple different sci-fi shows, and each different show that you watch is ultimately a story you get involved in, or it doesn't even have to be sci-fi. It could be fantasy or whatever it happens to be, whatever. But every episode could be like a completely different show, because each time you go to a different world, it could be a completely different style of story.
I think of it more So in my mind, for the sandbox that I like to run, it's still a galaxy. It's still a world. So it's not like you're going from Star Trek to aliens to things like this. You're picking a setting, right? So there's going to be common backdrops and elements that you're going to see, right?
Yeah.
You're going to see reoccurring governments. You're going to see characters from the prior things. It's like a TV show, but you're right in the sense that in anything that you've seen on TV, you can find in these things. And you might pull stuff from aliens into this thing, but it's not going to be the same setting necessarily.
Yeah,
and that's the big thing, is it's still cohesive. Even though we have a bunch of separate stories, they're all in the same world, and that can help, that makes you feel the connection there. And I didn't really talk about it, but a huge thing for sandbox is it needs to feel alive. The world itself needs to be doing things in the background, because in sandbox, less so than the other ones, the world doesn't care as much about the players. So it's going to keep on moving along, doing its things. And when you write up adventures, there's nothing that says that the players are going to do them. When you think about what's happening in the world, think about what happens when the players do and don't do this thing. Think of the consequence for inaction or failure, and then follow up on that, and then have something show up in the news or get in the way of them, or like, that's the best part about sandbox in my mind, is because there's so much to do, things will just naturally occur, and that will make the players be like, oh shit, this happened because we didn't do that. We heard about this, we chose not to do this thing, and now this happened because of us. And that can help. It's not a narrative that you came up with at the beginning of this thing, right? It's a thing that came up because of an episode, and then they just get to experience the consequences of that thing. A small little thing, a big thing, it depends on what kind of episodes they get themselves into.
Yeah, I think the best example of this in media is Star Trek. Especially if you think about like Next Generation, over the course of the 7 seasons, they kind of hit on every genre as like sci-fi horror, sci-fi action, sci-fi intrigue, sci-fi drama. Each of those things got hit over the course of the show. So it's the same universe, same everything, but you get to experience a different flavor. But at the end of every storyline, it reset to normal, and you got to then go on a new storyline. Which is kind of like in a sandbox. You finish the adventure, you get back on your ship, I'll go back to your inn. If you're playing in a fantasy, you reset,
The status quo.
Everything is done. You refresh the status quo, go back out for a new mission.
Yep. Yeah.
Especially the character status quo, not the world status quo.
Yeah.
But the character status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And like, so it's neat in that regard. And I really enjoy the sandbox. It's fun building that world. Like for me, I found that I love world building, and in sandbox you do a lot of that. Like I said, prep work was making all those locations. Something else I think is really cool to do is is to think about like friends, enemies, places, things that are going to be in the area. Get an idea of like what kinds of like things and points of interest are on these planets when you're writing your little prep work. So that way, when it comes time to write the session, you can just insert them into these story ideas that you have going on there. But it starts with that number, does a really cool job of having adventure seats. It's got 100 of them in there, and they just say like, here's a story, and they randomly just say like enemy, friend, location, thing in there, and you can just plop in whatever's relevant to where they're at, and you can just do something on the fly, and it can work out really well. So
I always have this problem with, I always think sandbox would be a lot of fun to run, but I have this huge like, the way I want a sandbox to be set up is so much work, because I told you guys about this, but I want the whole world
defined,
figure it out. So like if they enter this cave, I already know what's in there. Because like to me, a sandbox would be really neat if you could, anywhere you walk, the DM could open up that page in their notes and give you something right away. And like it's impossible. It's really, I'd be anytime impossible, but that's a lot of work.
That's putting all of the prep work at the very front. Like
Yes.
I shouldn't even say prep work. You did all the work on the front end, and just every so often you might need to tweak something as they interact with your world, but there's no prep work that you're really doing because it's already done.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's not really much different than writing a mega dungeon.
No.
the mega dungeon is the world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with the mega dungeon though, like you every week you could just come up with something new. Whereas it sounds like yours is like, no, like I have every cave system already done. I have all the loot that are in those caves. Every capital's laid out. I have all the intrigue that's happening in those places. I know what's underneath that rock and that rock before they even get to the table.
Yep.
Yes.
Actually impossible.
Yeah, but like old school people with the mega dungeons, they were done before a lot of them were finished before we started playing. Or you were 10 levels deeper. They were playing on level 8 and you had already finished through 18. Or something like that is how I understand it was done a lot back in the day. But the way I would love to prep a sandbox would be so much work. It'd be almost impossible.
It's so weird to hear you say love to prep it, but it doesn't sound like you would love to do that. It sounds like you wish it could be done that way.
Yes.
It would drive you insane.
Yeah, it would kill me.
Yep.
I can't even prep for a weekly session
Exactly.
for 4 players. Yeah, 3.5 players. 3.25 players.
3 players.
Yeah.
3 players and an NPC.
So that's Sandbox. It's low narrative in the sense that it's a lot of little narratives. Not necessarily that you can't have meaningful things. Not necessarily that you won't have like a neat big story that kind of happens. And you're going to see a lot of character growth. Like the thing that really, the narratives that kind of shine in these things are what your characters decide they want to do. And that's really what this highlights in my mind is like this naturally will highlight whatever your character's goals are because they're going to go from being whatever they started as to whatever badass you decided they wanted to be. Assuming you don't, fuck up and die, which is really likely in Stars Without Number. In my mind, sandbox games should be generally a bit more lethal, but that's a dial that you can adjust to your own preferences and tastes.
Yeah. All right, let's take the dial and just.
Oh my God!
Go
Let's turn me into Captain America at the end of this.
Yeah. And next beyond that really is where we start to include a little bit more narrative, like smaller arcs.
Narrative
chunks. Yeah, that's what we
chunk narrative.
We've been calling it for a little bit. Chunk narrative.
We didn't even get to say whatever else we were going to call it.
Chunk narrative.
That's what we're calling it. It's chunk.
For some reason, audience, we love it. Fell in love with chunk narrative.
All right, a bass boost me. Chunk.
Nice.
Chunk.
Chunk.
All right. Enough of the chunking.
Chunk.
Sorry, I got chunked up on that.
Wish you'd just chunk on it.
Promise.
But when it comes to chunk narrative, what? We called it chunk narrative. I'm calling it chunk narrative.
Say chunk one more time. I dare you.
Chunky chunk. What? Got none on this chunk.
All these motherfucking chunks on my motherfucking plane.
Oh.
How old am I? Oh, there's
veering
my
off.
airplane.
We're veering
There's
off.
my airplane.
All right. So, multi-narrative. Or
what are we talking about again?
We're talking about
chunk.
Multi-narrative.
Chunk narrative.
And the way we've kind of come to describe it is a narrative that is told like a small narratives. So like you'd have a small story arcs, but throughout your campaign you'd have multiple story arcs that don't necessarily have an overarching focus. So like throughout the course of a campaign you might have 4 or 5 story arcs. Thanks, bud. Like 4 or 5 story arcs that aren't necessarily connected. Maybe the very last one might have a tie-in that was hinted at in others, but it's not the focus of the campaign. Very similar to like the Marvel movies, where you might have like Iron Man 1, 2, and 3. None of them were really connected outside of your heroes. And sure, some of the things that might have happened in another story might be reflected in that story, like think Iron Man. The third movie, he's dealing with the issues of a story that happened in a different movie. But that arc of those 3 movies, like you have a small arc for each movie. And same goes for the other hero movies. You just have multiple little story arcs that can culminate, like throwing in the hint of Thanos in some of the earlier movies, ultimately leading an endgame. But in those stories, Thanos wasn't an issue. Like, he wasn't the ultimate thing. Maybe Guardians of the Galaxy is in a different example, but we're starting to derail. Or in the sense of Back to the Tabletop, another prime example that a lot of people could pull from is Critical Role. Their story arcs were very much small narratives. Towards the end, the second half of the campaign, they started hitting bigger narratives where it was a focus to deal with the Chroma Conclave or deal with the end boss of the campaign. But in those earlier versions, there wasn't that big bad that drove them. It was these small stories. Well, each story was an individual jump that wasn't necessarily tied together.
Well, they had, from when the show started, they had like the Underdark arc, the Blairwood arc, then the Chroma Conclave, then Asarak. No. What was his name?
Asarak?
Vecna. Sorry.
I haven't seen Critical Role. I was just throwing names out there.
No, I couldn't think of it.
But that's an example. Like, Merce did a good job of throwing in small nods. Like, way back when they did the Briarwood arc, when they first started airing this stuff on the internet, they mentioned, like, a bunch of bodies lining the wall of this ziggurat that had one arm missing and one eye missing. But that was kind of the only nod to it. There was an orb that would suck you in. That was a subtle nod that got to be played out later.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the goal of that arc. It wasn't that's what they were doing. And that's ultimately what multi-narrative is. It's just being able to do multiple little arcs that don't have a overarching push. Like, we're only doing this narrative or this small arc to get to our end arc. It's just, maybe they culminate into something, but they don't, that's not its goal.
Yeah. It's like 3 or 4 or 5 or however many you want independent storylines.
Yeah.
It might have a wrapper put around it to make it all one long thing.
Yeah. So when you're thinking of, like, creating this narrative, like, what is the thought process going into the chunk narrative?
What's the story we want to tackle? Like, in regards to, like, the campaign I ran with you guys in the very first half of the campaign, it was your families. It was your stories. And each arc could be kind of lengthy, maybe like a month or 2 of playing, but we're tackling your story. And we might hit on it multiple times, or we might only hit on it once. But that's kind of how I'd approach it, is thinking of, like, I want to tell this small story. Okay, we've told that small story. What's the next one? Where does the players want to go after that first story? And let the narrative, let the players carry that narrative to the next story based on what they want to do, and just keep going from there. And if you did want to do little hints and, like, that'd be a really cool guy to fight at the very end of this campaign, maybe you can start dropping small nods. Like,
I gotta go back and look over all of our session notes and see if I can find the small nods you gave us, John.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, damn it.
Mm-hmm. So, when you think of this, you're thinking of, like, each story being, like you said, a couple months, kind of what you end up spending, and that's kind of what you imagine then?
Yeah, the arc shouldn't be, because most of the time you could wrap up a single, like, small adventure, like, we go into the cave and fight the goblins and stop the problem that's happening to the village. I think of it a little bit longer than that, but not campaign like, it's not the full campaign, but you get a couple levels out of it. Each of these chunks should be several levels worth, whereas, like, a single adventure I might think of as a level, something to that effect, and an arc should be, for the most purposes, multiple level kind of arc.
Yeah, I think it's key to have it. I think multiple levels is a key part of this. Is that they're long enough for you to kind of be in an experience for a good portion of time, and then you move on to the next one. They're not something you hit in 3 sessions and leave.
Yeah, because like in Sandbox, you're probably going to do multiple of these, like, stories per level. Whereas in, like, a chunk narrative, you're expecting to do multiple levels per story.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a big difference when you're thinking of the scale of the story that you're wanting to tell in this.
And that's actually a kind of a great way of putting it. Is like in the sandbox setting, you're thinking almost more adventure to adventure versus arc to arc.
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. I mean,
would you prep it? Would you when you start the campaign? Would you think of each arc you want to run right away, or would you just when you prep the first arc and then back burner the second arc?
Myself, when it comes to prepping those kind of things, I would think where I would like to go, because like some adventures you could do all of your arcs in a single location. Or in the case, like a lot of times, I personally like leaving the city. I'm not a big on. I don't handle social politics so well, or the general politics so well that I can actually handle all of the adventure being in a city. That I think of it as like, okay, cool. We start in Neverwinter. All right, the next arc, I would like to be somewhere else. And maybe like on the very last one would be like, I would love to go to the plains, like take you guys to the plains, because experiencing different portions of the world is often fairly fun.
Okay.
So that's when that's how I think about a lot of the prep work that goes into it. Is what are some of the things that you as the DM want to hit? Like, you may not have, like, I oftentimes would prefer, like, in that storytelling to not necessarily have like utter control over, like, okay guys, you finished this arc, guess what, you're over here now, but rather, where do you want to go next? Like, now that you did that, you have the whole world, where do you want to go? Like, do you there's, and maybe that's at that point you drop hooks, is after the very first arc you have multiple hooks, and the players might take them, or they might just choose, you know what, I don't care about the land anymore, I want to go out to sea. And then it's like, sure, arc for the sea. Saltmarsh, here I come.
Okay, so you might have like 5 or 6 adventures stories you want to do, but you won't plan them all out. You might plan the first one, and then slowly work on the other ones as you go along.
Yeah, and also if it's a new group of players, it might be that first arc might be getting a better grasp of kind of like what they're looking for. In regards to what kind of stuff they want to do. Like, they're a small town farmer and they just want to get out of the farm, and I want to see the world. Okay, well then if the whole group is of that mindset, then great. Cool. My next hooks that I can throw at the end of this arc will be, you guys go to Earthhome, or you guys head down to Waterdeep, or you guys head. That's
too much. You go from farm to village to small city, then you get to Earthhome. You don't want to hop right up to. Go from a farm in
big
Kansas.
Damn heroes.
Go from a farm in Kansas to New York the next day.
Dude, that'd be a dope ass
culture
thing.
shock.
Yeah, I would love. That would be kind of neat. What's her name? Oh, God.
Julie.
No, there's a
Amanda.
thing where there's a TV
Anna.
show where she
Rebecca.
was
Kimmy
in,
Schmidt.
yeah, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
There it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
she
was
was.
close.
You were right there. No, I like that. Something that I think is interesting whenever we talk about chunk narrative is the way I run my current campaign is, I think, more similar to this than the true sandbox, even though I keep calling my campaign sandbox. But what I did was is different than John. I thought about story arcs that I wanted to happen to the sector that would be things that the players could get into if they wanted a bigger story. So I had a ton of little stories written into my thing if they wanted to just go along that. But if ever they were not digging that, or because this would be, Sandbox had never been done in our group before. Not truly. We always had the bigger stories, the clear tracks that you could get onto, and things like that. And so I made sure in this thing I had things I kind of thought would be neat. And I said, you know what, fuck it. I'll throw them in, and I will let the thing happen. And they'll probably be cool enough that players will want to interact with them. But maybe they'll find that they don't want to. Maybe they'll be like, you know what? That's like a big person problem. And like, I don't really want to deal with that stuff. Like that's cool and all, but they've got it. I'll just go hang out over here or just fucking leave. I don't need to stay here if I don't want to. So that's kind of how I framed my stars thing, was with a couple of like narrative arcs that were designed to just happen in the sector that the players were free to jump onto if they decided to.
It reminds me of 2 points. Is that Sandbox is not all Sandbox episodic, and not all episodic campaigns are Sandbox.
Correct.
Sandbox is much more than just being episodic storytelling.
No, it just lends itself strongly to that.
And the episodic storytelling does not necessarily have to be a Sandbox campaign either.
Yeah.
It's just it's a helpful way to describe Sandbox.
It's the majority of them. All the true ideal of Sandbox is episodic.
Yeah.
But that is not always how it works out.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking of is that your campaign can easily, its narrative slider can change in the middle of the campaign.
Yeah.
Very easily.
Yes.
You can be like, I'm gonna do episodic. It'd be no big, I just make up something fun every week, and then your players hop on a thread.
Yep.
And don't want to come off of it.
Yep.
And then you see that go from episodic to chunk.
Yep.
And then singular narrative at the end. It can go from one thing to the whole story is one, and you didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is on the DM to just kind of like
roll with what the players want.
If the players are having fun, that's the narrative style you should go with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I could learn that. If I only had learned that lesson before I started doing Stars Without Number. Because I think as the campaign, it would have been very beneficial, because that is something that I resisted a little bit in there, and it's not been like bad, but I can the party wanted that more. I felt that I don't think that the Sandbox style was as appealing to the group there. They wanted that firmer story, because that's what they're kind of those a bit more of the rails on them per se.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the storytelling, the narrative scale, you start to, and it's not necessarily the rails that you hop on, but so much as the focus of the story is able to be you're able to narrow it down. In the Sandbox sense, the truest of Sandbox sense, it can, if the group doesn't have a leading voice or the party isn't easily coming to consensus, paralysis.
Oh yeah.
Choice paralysis could easily set in.
Analysis paralysis, yep.
Whereas when you have these small, with a chunk narrative, you have these small things to focus on. Cool. This is the story we're on. We're going to conclude this story. Or in the case of Matt was saying about his current Stars campaign, we chose to cling to this story right here, and we're going to see it to its conclusion.
Yep.
So we have these small chunks of narrative.
Yep. It's kind of neat. It's kind of fun. Running a campaign is so much fun. Like at the end of the day, this is to help get you ready for it. But once you get playing, it's just go with the flow.
Yeah.
You're here to have fun. If they're liking what you're doing, you just keep doing that. If they're not liking about it, check in with them and then adjust from that.
I was realized that I had never really thought about my current campaign I'm running, what kind of campaign it is. And as we're talking tonight, I'm running an episodic campaign, which is new for me. I've never run an episodic campaign before.
Yep.
But it's clearly episodic because there's just been 5 missions that have nothing to do with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Except for some maybe vague background things. But
yeah, which any good
but it's not
episodic should have.
It is also in no way Sandbox.
Yeah.
Because there's enough world written.
Yeah, there's enough world written.
Yeah.
What's down that road?
You know what?
We're about to find out. Paint me a picture.
Tis a silly place.
Tis a silly place.
We're heading in this direction. Yeah, I don't feel like walking. Teleport there.
I got hosed on Tuesday. Hosed.
Did they tell? Oh, they've got teleportation.
They rescued somebody, and they needed to get him to a capital city.
That was 300 miles away or something like
that.
But
I thought they would go via the local hub city, so they could have some experiences, and so I could spend more time in the next week prepping the big city.
Instead.
Because I'm they have teleport, but they have no way it's going to be risky to teleport there. And then John's but if I have a clothing item from that location, it's 100% chance of getting there. And I was fuck.
Wow. Fun fact.
What level are they?
7.
So he rolled randomly on the table and gave us a few items.
Wasn't random on the table.
Wasn't out.
It was a story. The bad guy they had just killed had a necklace of teleportation.
For a purpose. And we did find out the purpose, too. Like, we know why it was on this person. But we acquired it.
Man,
and
how did they kill that boss? Couldn't they just leave?
They were focused on something else, and then they stopped being able to do anything. Hello, hypnotic pattern.
Oh, yeah, hypnotic pattern.
The
So
boss
good.
was casting a ritual. The group walked in, and then John laid down a hypnotic pattern that knocked the boss out.
Oh, you failed your legendary resistance? Or you didn't have
Didn't have
legendary
legendary
resistance?
Didn't have a legendary resistance.
It happens.
And then I was like, well, there goes everything.
So we got a few pieces of gear, and one of them was the teleportation stone, which I myself am aware of how deadly teleporting is, especially at lower levels when you can't absorb the 10d10 or 6d10 damage
It's not that bad.
from
It's 4, I think.
botching the roll.
I think it's only D6s. But still, it sucks.
And so I was relying on the fact that they had never been to the capital.
But the dude...
But the
had been-
person we
but the
saved,
person-
But the person they saved was wearing clothes that had been in the capital within the last 6 months.
and constant it's the
Its
home,
home
item.
was the the item's home was the capital city.
Yep.
And
So
and then I was like, you can do what now? I'm like, oh well, all right, let's figure this out. Good times. Anyway, diversion. Sidetrack.
welcome to our podcast, where if we do diverge from our path of thought, it is usually tends to still be related to the subject matter.
Tangent 1.
3D10.
Million.
3D10.
All 3D10. It's not that bad, but you can also screw up multiple ways. Mind you, the location we were teleporting to was right off of the Gulf, or off in an ocean, so we could have just veered right off and plunked our butts right in the middle of 20 miles out in the water.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you
in the
can re-roll
mountainside.
the mishap multiple times.
Yeah.
Yep.
On the mountainside.
Or in the mountainside, or just straight up. It could have just been 20 miles up in the air.
Yeah. No DM would ever teleport somebody into the air, would they, John?
Would they, John?
What? Most of you could land just fine. What? One was over the water. He had a hammer that broke the tension of the water. It was a very impressive feat of intelligence for a barbarian with no intelligence. And the other one could fly.
Instinct.
The other one could fly.
Yeah.
It's fine. Look.
And what about the one that couldn't fly, couldn't teleport, and didn't land over water?
Which one? You? I don't know.
Wasn't it Abe?
No, Abe just appeared in a church,
Jabari
crash
fell
landed
into
in
a church.
He fell into a church. He had an existential moment where he got to actually speak with the dead, and it was just great.
That's right.
It was a very moving and poignant moment
Was
for him.
my favorite part of the entire campaign up to now.
Yeah.
It was a pretty awesome moment.
It's,
But
All right,
let's
so
go ahead.
moving
And
on.
let's dial that up a little bit
Moving
more.
on, yeah.
We were at the dial before, now we're going.
all right. Have you taken your cough drop? Are you ready to do this?
I'm ready to go.
All
Let's
right.
hear the silky sweet melody of Abe's voice.
Yeah, my raspy, sexy voice.
Oh, it's not sexy. It's just raspy.
So I'll tell you now, I am a little sick. I'm getting over something, so my voice is shredded from all my hot tunes. And I was singing with Metallica over the weekend.
You were singing with Metallica. Damn. Fucking.
Singing with or singing? That's
Singing with.
very different.
No, I'm good friends with Metallica. We're best
Oh,
bros.
okay. Cool.
Yeah, he's
cool,
in
cool,
the
cool,
band.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm the other lead vocalist.
All right, Abe. All right, Abe.
All right,
So-
Abe. All right, Abe.
All right,
All right, Abe.
So
all right, all right, Abe.
the fourth, the dial number setting 4 on our narrative dial is the singular narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the idea that the campaign has one overarching narrative that ties everything together. The best example to me in fiction is Lord of the Rings, or Battlestar Galactica. It's one thing that everything links to. You're trying to survive, trying to get the ring of Mordor to melt it, and everything in the story serves that purpose. It is, and this typically will have, the classic big bad evil guy or big bad evil group, which I've done with the BBEG.
Wow, original. Sorry.
BBE. Oh, I messed up my own joke. This is the BBEG, which is the big bad evil guy, and there's the BBEO, which is the big bad evil organization. And then I flubbed my own joke because I'm an idiot.
All right,
You've
let me
got
cl-
this.
All right. Let's go ahead and let's get our edit lines ready.
Hold on. One more time. like it was.
All
the
right,
first
and
time.
now let's take this narrative slider up to 4. Abe,
I don't know what's happening anymore.
his Metallica aidled brain can't keep up with the
Exactly.
jokes.
These campaigns tend to end with the with a classic top of the tower fight with the big bad evil guy. Is a very typical way a campaign would end.
All right.
This style of campaign can take a decent amount of player buy-in to being willing to ride on that ride. So that means that when you make your characters for a campaign that is a singular narrative, you want to make sure your character has a reason to be in the singular narrative. Why that they want to be on this story. They want to go along with it. They have some reason to do it. Because if you make a character who fights it, it's just going to be unenjoyable for lots of people.
Yeah.
It brings
And
up a lot
yourself,
of.
most importantly.
Yeah.
Well, it brings up the question oftentimes with a character like that of like, why are you even here then?
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
you sit there and go, why am I here? And then you don't enjoy what's happening in front of you. But that doesn't excuse the DM. The DM also has to be, make it interesting. You got to make, and a lot of the things is the transitions between sections of the narrative have to be good and have strong reasons. So why are we going from the Shire to Mordor, or why are we going from the Shire to Riverdale to Moorland to Mordor? Like, these things are important. Why are we taking the next step every time?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where railroading can become an issue. And
Yes, that's what I always worry when I hear singular narrative. I think
Yeah.
I'm stuck.
yeah, so railroading is the idea that the players have no choice.
Yep.
And that everything they do, that they can make no changes to the story, that they are just along for the ride. And so railroading, but a lot of times railroading then gets meant that people conflate railroading and singular narrative as the same thing. And it doesn't have to be that way. So to me, in a singular narrative campaign, players still can make choices. It's just that the narrative is that is still the one story going on. So like, if you thought the players might say, "Yes, I'm going to help this kingdom out," and the players say, "No, I'm not going to," that doesn't mean that the singular narrative isn't still occurring. But you don't have to tell the players, "No, you need to do this." You have to find a way to work them back into the plot. That makes sense. I feel like I got lost in that one a little bit.
To use Lord of the Rings again, as you said, as a reference, your 4 players are the hobbits. They're going to, they're advised, they're heavily advised by Gandalf to meet them in Bree. Well, they don't have to necessarily stop in Bree, but they're told to. They could choose to avoid Bree altogether, and maybe throughout their adventure they botch a few too many rolls, and now they're very much off course, and they're avoiding Bree altogether. And it's those choices and those events that allow it to stop necessarily being on a rail. Whereas a rail, you're going to make sure that they are going to Bree no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah. The story ends back up with them bringing the ring towards the next destination. Like the Bree is the next spot that they're supposed to go to, but if something happens, then you as the DM fit that into your single narrative. How does this further the outcome of the overall story's tension?
Yeah, because the singular narrative is not a road mark. They're not going down one path. Like, there is not one path, but there is one story. Those are two different things, and that also gets conflated sometimes. People think that singular narrative is you have to go down this road and take these paths, these directions to get to the end. And it's not that. It's that there's one story, and how the players interact with the story is what happens.
I feel like oftentimes there is going to be fewer roads to take, though, in a singular narrative. At least, like, how I visualize and have kind of like experienced like single narratives.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, because there is expectation that the players are buying into it.
Yeah.
So that their characters should want to go along on what's happening.
It's not that it's bad. It's just that's why we bring up railroading, because you have to make sure that you're still giving your characters their free choice, But your characters also like it's a balance between making sure they have enough choice that they can feel like their decisions matter, but they have to make sure that they aren't going too off kilter and just getting away from the story that they're meant to experience, right?
Yeah. Yes, and a lot of that's also, like I said, making sure that transitions between chapters of the story are strong, so they have a reason to continue. Because I think that's where a lot of the railroading typically comes in, when the players don't feel a connection to what's happening in front of them, and so they want to do something different, and then that throws off the track, and then you feel like you have to push them back on the track.
Mm-hmm.
If you make it interesting enough, they're not going to want to go off the track.
Well, it's hard to do.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's making it a roller coaster, not a railroad.
Yeah. Wait.
Yeah, that's a
All
good way
right.
of putting it.
Yeah,
It's an exciting rail to ride on. You can always
Yeah.
choose to get off the ride, but you want to ride. It's the coolest ride.
You can always get off the ride, but it might be disastrous if you get off in the middle of the ride.
yeah, and like that's the other thing, if your players just don't want to be involved with the story you're telling, that might be a sign that this campaign isn't going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that you have a great idea and you do the prep work. You sit down and say, "Hey guys, this is the session I want to run." They're all like, "Hell yeah, I've bought into this." You start running it, and they're like, "Well, shit, I'm not actually digging this way I thought I would." And you're like,
Yeah.
"Well, rip this campaign. I'll bring it up with another group of people."
Yeah, you have to either you can pivot to something different or just say this is not going to work out.
Yeah, let it
Yeah.
peter out, or you can switch it out, switch it over.
Um,
Shit, I think that'd be hilarious, or that could be fun if you start doing a single narrative. People are like, "I'm not really digging this main storyline." You're like, "Okay, all right. Well, where do you guys want to go?" And just let them off the narrative and go somewhere else, and then just finish off the narrative in the background.
yeah,
I also like the idea of you doing that, where it's like the single narrative. You're going to be the hero to the kingdom, but instead you chose not to, and it's like, all right, fine, we're going to go and do smaller stuff off to the side.
But some
And
new hero picks it up.
But all of those small little things are the only way that the big story actually was able to resolve itself, because the little guys on the side were solving the problems that nobody else saw.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just these small little things.
I thought I was going to have to do this in my Out of the Abyss campaign. I thought that you guys were going to punt halfway through the story.
We made it.
There were times
We persevered
Yeah.
through the power of Bjorn.
Um,
I only had to murder a Mycalod, whatever the fuck they're called. I killed a fungus.
Oh, the Mycodon.
Mycodon.
Look, we had to kill a monk, and that was fine.
We did
Oh
one
my
character
God,
at the
it
halfway
was
point, though.
so much fun. Who did we lose?
The monk,
No, the sorcerer, Kalen.
the sorcerer.
Kalen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Kalen. He retired after the
monk.
monk incident.
Yeah.
But that was also the halfway point of the campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we lost the monk due to combat, and then because of the loss of the monk and the situation, the sorcerer was like, fuck these guys.
Yeah.
I blame you two
You two are
characters.
idiots. I'm done.
Yeah.
We're like,
The character
Well,
blamed the characters.
Yeah.
to be fair, and our character's like, well, I guess he is kind of like a pansy. He's just not ready for this kind of commitment.
Look, I have a default. If you're going to keep blaming me or something, I'm going to lean into the skid of it. And yeah, that guy deserved it. He was a wimp. He didn't deserve to be down here. Maybe next time he should think about it.
I don't think your character ever said that. But my character did. It was like, you were responsible for stuff. They're like, if he were stronger, he wouldn't have died. And
That's so true.
I'm convinced that particular responses led to him leaving the party, because my character was trying to become the god of strength and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry if he just wasn't strong enough. Like, there's no shame in being weak. It's just what he is. He chose this life. I chose to be stronger. I almost said better. That's a surefire way to piss someone off.
So when you're doing your doing the single form narrative, what do your hooks look like in regards to, like, you now you do each adventure leads to the next thing that progresses towards that final narrative, because it's all one big narrative. Like Lord of the Rings, you gotta get to Mordor. That's the ultimate buy-in, is that you have to get the ring somehow to Mordor. So you have those small narratives, and that's the difference between like the chunk and the single form, is that each one is developing further and further. When you're doing that, what are you thinking in regards to the hook to get them to the next thing? Is it a multiple choice, Or is it more singular choice in regards to the follow-up hooks to each adventure they finish up or small arc?
It depends a lot on the answer. It can be either, which is not a very helpful answer.
It's accurate.
You can have some campaigns where they know that they know the goal. So they might start out the campaign and know what the end goal of the campaign is. And I feel in that kind of style campaign, it can be a little bit more like, here's the next step of the quest. And you can lay it out directly in front of them. And they're just going down the quest. And they're doing everything in the order that they need to achieve the final goal. In a campaign, we might be obfuscating what the singular narrative is. It might be multiple choice. So, like, in Out of the Abyss, this would be spoilers for the Out of the Abyss campaign.
Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning.
Each...
That was not planned.
Nope.
Enter into the Underdark for the first time, you don't know what's going on. You discover it as you go through. These are the 3 cities you can go to, and you can pick whatever you want. And like so, that's a multiple choice option, and you can pick whichever way you want to go. There's a ideal way the book is written, but it's not the same thing as being forced down those paths. And then you slowly discover what the overarching narrative is, and realize you're in the middle of it already. So I think it's both. It's whatever you want to do. I think both can be a lot of fun. And I would think it would be really interesting, because I never really actually had a chance to do this, is play the singular narrative, you know the goal from the beginning style campaign. Well, like, you've made, your table has made 5 characters who know that they need to get the ring in the mountain. And that is their goal from day one. And so there's no, like, quabbling over which way to go. There's no, like, pantsing. It's like, I need to get there.
Yep.
And they just march forward.
Yep.
And the DM can lay out this, like, long, step by step process. It might be fun just to be like, it's simple. It's point that direction and walk until we get there. Could be kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, that could be a lot of fun for, like, if you're kind of new to it, or if you're just like, or if you're just kind of wanted, like, if you've got a, your DM's been planning a story for a long time, and they've really got this cool world and setting, and it's like, hell yeah, I kind of want to, like, see this, and I want to see what I can do in this setting with this world facing these challenges.
Yeah.
Like, that can be fun.
That's when there isn't, like, drama or twist and turn. Like, there's going to be a lot of fun things that happen on the path to the end.
Yeah.
You just know you're walking in that direction.
This is my big question that I want to know. Do you think that your singular narrative will remain unchanged by the players?
No, of course not. They are
good.
They are changing what's happening. But, like, in my singular narrative, what I was like, this big bad evil guy wants to conquer the world. That might be the singular narrative. And it's obviously a very simple one. That's the narrative that's happening in the world at this point in time. And you want the players to be involved in this narrative. So you've written it so they can try to thwart the guy's plans as they go along.
Do you imagine that, like, a singular narrative is more you planning out what the opposition is doing, and then the players have to figure out how to stop that?
Yeah, because it's not, when you write a singular narrative, you're not writing, in my mind, it's not that you're writing the adventure from 1 to 20 with everything figured out. Is that there's one storyline going on. There's one thing to focus on. And that might be what the bad guy is trying to conquer the world, and it's all you're going to focus on what that guy does.
Yep, and you're there to interact with that.
Yes, exactly. You're not planning out every mission. It's not that you've already written the novel and the players are going through the novel. It's already been written.
Yep.
Is that you've written, you know the story that's happening, or what's happening in the world, and you want the players to be involved in that story.
Yep. You know the motivations, you know the actions that they are going to take unless they are disturbed, and that's the players are there.
Yeah.
So, to make it related to a more general populace, would you describe that from the knowing your goal from the very beginning, very Lord of the Rings-esque? Like, would you describe that story fits that bill of, like, I know what the end goal is, like, this is going to be happening, and the players get to know that from the beginning?
That is one way to do it. Yeah. That is a version of singular narrative. That is not all singular narratives.
No, but it's an easy reference.
Most movies are singular narrative.
Yeah. Well, and most novels are singular narrative.
Yes.
Yep.
There's a lot of singular narrative.
Yeah, it's
like
very
there's a lot of
common.
examples of it.
Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah.
Probably why it's so important to talk about.
Yeah, it's one of the many different styles.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
we can find examples in media of all three of these.
But Lord of the Rings is just an easy one to keep plucking from since we're on that bandwagon. But to go over what you said about like how the players can, like, the ultimate goal is always there, but the players are the ones that are controlling like necessarily how they get there. But like, oh, we need to go, like, cool, 2 players decided, you know what, the schedule's not working out for me. We're going to take the ring ourselves to Mordor, and off go the 2 hobbits. And then the other 3 characters are like, okay, well, we can't follow them. What can we do to still help?
Yeah.
And ultimately just keep that snowball rolling to ultimately lead to the Riders of Rohan, to the fight at Minas Tirith, all the way to
The fight's at the gates.
right at the gates. And it's all, and if you think about the Fellowship as literally a group of players, each diverging group having their own goals, ultimately, no matter what adventures they got themselves on, whether it was freeing Isengard or whatever it happens to be, each of those adventures, each pushing the narrative forward to reach that ultimate goal.
Exactly. It all relates to one single overarching story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the hallmark. Now, the beauty of singular narratives, if you don't want to write one yourself nowadays, is that predominantly these are the type of books that Wizards is putting out for
Yep.
5th edition.
Yeah.
We already mentioned All the Abyss is a nice, long, singular narrative story. Curse of Strahd is singular narrative. Storm King's Thunder. Prince of the Apocalypse. I'm blanking on one right now. That was Tyranny of Dragons.
No, Tyranny of Dragons.
These all have to do with one conflict, one story happening in the world that you go through and experience.
Yep.
So it's easy to pick up the book and run the venture right from there. Save you on prep work.
Save so much prep work. Not none. You still have to read it.
You read it, week prep, and then make it your own for your characters, for
Yeah.
your players.
Yeah.
That's a big part. I didn't do that really well in my All the Abyss campaign. I really regret is I didn't tailor it enough to the players. I tried to rebound in the second half, and we got there eventually to make it a little more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I was to become a god.
That was the biggest mistake.
and then,
I am the biggest mistake. And I'm big. Strength 20.
and the other thing about single narrative campaigns is that it does not mean there cannot be side quests as a part of it. It does not mean that you can be going down this one central storyline for 7 levels, and maybe you take a level break and you do something different because something else came up or the players got really interested in something else. They can go do something else that isn't related to the overarching storyline, and then you can come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
You can, it's not like you have to, everything has to be so tied in. And the other part is that some adventures might not feel tied in but they're gearing up for what's happening, or they're dealing with a smaller side problem to then come back into the major problem.
Which is cool as hell once the reveal happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, I like the side quest comment because it's like in a single form narrative, like a single narrative campaign, side quest is just that. It's a side quest. It's something like maybe there's a little bit of downtime between each, of your arcs or something like that. They get to veer off and have a little bit of flavor, whereas like a side quest in a single, like in a multi-narrative format, is almost more like here's an optional thing you can tack on. It's like this isn't really too much part of it, but it's this optional thing. Maybe you get a little extra gold if you finish it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in a sandbox, it's just another adventure.
Yeah.
Like you really don't have necessarily a side quest in a sandbox setting compared to like the other two. And then of course the narrative, that's just another room.
Yeah.
It's just the bonus floor, bonus level.
Bonus donut.
No, but I like the comment of the side mission there, because that kind of a good point.
Well, we even had a little bit of that in Out of the Abyss, or at least I felt like we kind of had that. So like little like side missions, nothing that was a full level, right? Except when we went back to the countryside and dealt with
the kobolds.
The kobolds.
Yeah.
And dealt with, oh god,
A dragon.
not Derp. What the fuck his name is?
Droop.
Droop. Because Droop then had like been there. We got to find out that he had become like a cleric, and like we got like a lot of like character kind of like development stuff kind of happening there.
But Droop was with you from the beginning.
Yeah, Droop was with us in the beginning, but we found out then and there that he had been gained.
Droop. Well, because you guys spent like half a year visiting other kingdoms,
Yeah,
and during that time period, Droop stayed in the village and built you a house.
yeah.
But he was with you for the first half of the Underdark.
Yeah,
adventure.
the
Yeah,
only
I
reason
know.
we went back into that shitty ass hole was simply because Droop was being tortured.
Which shitty hole?
The starting
sorry.
shithole.
Yeah, at the very beginning of the campaign, we left where we were going to leave, and then Droop had been captured and tortured. We're like, no, we're unarmored. This was probably a suicide mission, but we are getting Droop back.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
We
Droop.
turned into that thing against against all of our better judgments and against the wishes of the DM, because it was suicide. But we were also level 5, and I was a barbar, which was
You
like
were Barbar
cheating.
at that point.
I was a barbar at that point in time. I only changed classes I only changed twice. Barbar to Wrath Paladin to that UA Paladin that was super busted.
Pacifist.
Redemption.
Oh, I thought it was pacifist.
Yeah,
Alright.
but it fit Bjorn's growth. He started off as an angry barbarian, and then he found Jesus and became to a revenge based one, and then he saw the light and saw that he could be a bigger person, and then he took up the mantle of redemption. I want to say retribution because I finally remembered the correct term for it. So Bjorn grew and got stronger.
Yeah. Maybe a little overpowered end of the campaign.
It was delightful. I loved it.
I did give all of you artifacts. That's on me.
I was the
Yep.
only one who asked for an artifact, but because I did, everyone got them.
Yep. Whatever. It worked out.
I liked it.
So I know we're kind of lagging out a little bit, but I'm kind of curious.
Yo,
When it
what's up?
comes to the single narrative, how are you planning that? When you sit down and you're like, I want to tell the Lord of the Rings. How are you thinking of in terms of planning for that?
I don't know if I like the idea that you want to tell the Lord of the Rings.
Well, no. Like you have the goal. You have a ring. It needs to get destroyed. How are you planning for that in the campaign format? Because you are you're not railroading, as we stated. You're looking to. They're buying into a path that's for the most part laid out before them. There's plenty of points where they can take lefts and rights and choose to continue down the river or across the river. But your ultimate goal is to get to there. What is your thought process in regards to planning for something like that?
So for me, the biggest thing is that I would try to understand the villain of the campaign, all the conflict of the campaign, really well. Is be able to think in the opponent's mindset, so I understand how they react to what's going on around them, and then I would plan out the beginning couple of adventures, the first couple of steps along the path towards the goal. If you're doing a goal-based one, if you're doing the players are discovering what's happening and trying to get them to want to become involved, I always like laying out connections. So I know I would typically run the hidden meaning or the hidden bad guy style or the discovering the bad guy style than I would you're the missile to the goal style. So if you're discovering what's happening, I would start laying connections so I could in the world, so I could then use those connections to draw the players into the overarching story.
Yeah.
So the first couple levels might be they're working for the local lord, so that way at level 4 the lord can be like, well, this bigger thing's happening over here. Can you handle that? And I would drop hints. I would have it so that almost every single adventure had some tie to the big bad evil thing.
Yeah.
Whether it be a piece of lore or maybe a lieutenant of the big bad evil guy is running this local problem because it helps him with his goal.
Okay.
So that the players can, so that you're pulling them down this singular storyline by making them want to figure out what the clues mean. Like, why did I get this weird? Why is this guy doing this? Or what is this book about? That this clearly important book must mean something. So they want to discover it. And then by them wanting to discover it, they get themselves involved with what's happening. So that's how I would do. I would lay out hints at the beginning and pull them, make them connected to what's happening before you reveal what the bit thing that's happening is. So they're in the web already.
Yeah. Okay.
You gotta really think it through. What you want, what the narrative is. You have to have a strong motivation and like plan for what the evil guys, or whatever the conflict is. You really need. I mean,
the antagonist to the story.
Yeah, conflict's super important for all of these things, but I think it's most important in singular narrative because everything is based around that conflict.
That conflict has to be really interesting and deep, and have many meanings to it, so the players can latch onto it.
Yeah,
okay, it is the one conflict. So it better be a doozy of a conflict.
Yeah, and interact approachable. It needs to be approachable enough. Like they need to know how. Like if it's so massive, right? Then it's going to be really hard to get the players on board with it unless you can show them a way that they can meaningfully interact with the conflict.
Yeah. So and also to me that also links players should always make characters that think they can do it. Like, you make a hero when you make a character in a role-playing game. That's my view.
Yeah.
And I know there are some out there that are thinking of, some of the characters you see in various medias of who don't think they can do it.
Matt Coffin.
Even still, your character should still want to be there. Yeah. For some whether it's their friends, their family, whatever it happens to be, even if they don't have the I'm a hero kind of personality, they should still be doing it with a purpose. Because if you don't have a purpose to be there, then there's a problem.
Yeah. Make sure you get your motivations down for your characters as well.
Yeah.
That's part of the buy-in.
Yeah. You need a buy-in reason to keep going with this thing. Maybe at a later point in time, you've purchased and you're ready to check out. You can bring in another character, but each character should have that buy-in purchase or that buy-in to keep staying with the group and keep going, and that goes for all of them.
Oh yeah, we were talking about. We finished with single narrative, but there's a different buy-in for every one of these. For chunk narrative, for sandbox, even for dungeon crawl.
Don't go in dungeon crawl wanting a narrative.
Yeah.
Oh God, no.
Right. But you still there's buy-in of you have to accept the fact because it can be. Not everyone wants to just do a bunch of combat. Some people want to do a bit more role play and things like that. You have to be. Don't create a too interesting a character, or don't come into a dungeon crawl thing with like I'm a social character and I'm ready to talk the pants off of anything we come across. This is not going to go well for you. I hope you like a struggle.
Yeah.
Until you come across like the Sphinx and other things that are just way beyond you, but you can talk your way past. And all of a sudden it's like, thank you, Bard.
Oh yes, thank you. 90% of the campaign I did nothing, but this one moment.
That's all I care about is one moment.
Made it worth it. If you're an audience member, maybe it is.
So, in regards to the overall, like I was just thinking of the overall prep work of these various types and the things that you got to kind of think like, anyways.
A whole episode on just prep work.
Well, not in regards to necessarily just like the full laydown of prep work, but I was thinking of like when it comes to the prep work of no narrative and it's just that dungeon crawl.
Yeah.
You got to be thinking about. You got to be good. Like, if you're going to do a dungeon crawl, you better really enjoy building encounters.
Yeah.
If you're doing sandbox, you got to be almost like an improvisational
it's a lot of improv.
Yeah, and not just like and when I say improvisational,
improvisational.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
Got your back, fam.
Storytelling, I don't mean at the table, but like the ability to switch from, I have like in Stars, you have those tags to be able to switch from being able to tell a story about zombies to telling a story about a world filled with over rampant nature. Maybe they're both horrors. Maybe that's your bag. Maybe you really enjoy horror.
I do like horror.
But you could just you have to be kind of ready to be on the fly for whatever the players target next.
Yeah.
And then when you got multi-narrative or chunk narrative, that's sort of like telling short form narrative or short form novels, or I believe novella is what you And then when you go for a single form narrative, then you're talking about a full novel.
Yeah.
Like, you have those small little guys, or you have the big guy.
Yeah.
And then the first one is like, I want to tell a story about this and this and this. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Sandbox, you tend to have a lot of prep work each week because you're writing for the next thing. But you can help mitigate how much prep work you do each week by creating those tags and creating those couple sentence descriptions for each of the locations that you've imagined. So that way, because it's a limited number of options, right, for the players. Like, because, sure, if they say that we want to go to, Neverwinter, I'm going to try to pull a system that I don't know so well, but help me out with names. But to Major City X, you're like,
Neverwinter, sure.
And you're like, awesome, cool. The players want to go there. Everything's happening there. Any story you can possibly imagine can happen there. Yep. But this is a campaign. This is your campaign. What story do you want to happen there? And so that's really what you're doing. Anything can happen there. So decide what you want to happen in that city. And when the players go there, that is the thing that will present itself to them. And that's the thing that they can get to grab onto. They decide not to grab onto it. Sure, you can improv from there. Or you can just let them know right then, hey, you guys just ignored everything I prepped for, and I'm not going to be able to just improv right away. So we're going to call it here, and I will come back to you guys next week with the stuff that you're interested in doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's something that you have to be prepared to do in a sandbox thing, where it's very easy for them, where it's expected that they are deciding the direction and doing random shit. Now, generally, they should understand that, the story at each location is what they're going to get, but every group's different. Everyone has their own comfort levels with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, they go to a planet that's just nothing but a giant metropolitan city world. They're not going to get an old Western feel.
Unless they go to the active VR bar that's still operating there and it happens to be malfunctioning. It's taken over Quadrant A2.
Look, I'm not saying that you can't make up a thing.
Dude, I'll shove it in there if I have to.
Like I was going to say.
No, they go to Westworld.
They just go to Westworld.
There it is.
But I get what you're saying, John. There's a theme that's expected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice not to jar. It's nice to play on expectations because it makes it easier for the players to kind of get in the zone. But it can be fun if they go one place to then just change the feel up entirely.
Yeah.
Because that in itself, that surprise can be exciting as well. But you can't do it the same way every time. Don't always have a twist. All right. You don't need to M. Night Shyamalan them every time.
Matt, I'm telling you, stop pivoting to Old West style locations
I just
everywhere we
love
go.
The Old West, what can I say?
We flew across the galaxy and we're still in an Old West location.
There's a reason that Firefly was my example for Sandbox.
All right, y'all. You go ahead and take off. We'll see you next time you come around. All right, we're landing on the new planet. Why don't we check in with our landing crew? Hey, y'all. Welcome to our planet. I'm glad to have you here. Aren't you the same guy? Didn't we just leave you? That was my brother. Welcome back.
Oh, it's like the nurses from Pokemon.
There
Yes. Every single dock operator there, control flight director is just the same group of brothers. They're all cowboys.
They're all Nurse Choice.
Yep.
Every single one of them looks exactly the same. They're all anime goals in a non-anime world.
And they all sound like Garth Brooks.
Oh, nice. Oh. I wasn't expecting that, Trist.
Yeah, right?
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
Questions, comments, concerns? Anything else you guys want to air out?
No,
that shirt you're wearing is not the greatest shirt, though.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
It's baggy on me.
Wow.
But these pants make my ass look fly.
They always
my
look
package.
fly.
No, my pants look droopy recently. It hurts to see.
Sad pants.
The sad pants stuff.
Yeah, I don't have much more to tack onto that. I mean, we kind of covered what each of those narratives are, how they kind of play into the process of building a campaign.
So much more to say about running and creating and prepping. There's a
well,
lot that goes into it, but this is a good place to start.
Yeah.
To kind of frame the stories that you want to tell.
Yeah, like this is ultimately the choice of narrative is how the style of legwork that you're comfortable handling and what you're looking to do with it. Whereas, each of those forms of narrative, you have a different style of prep work you have to think about, and the way that you can prep a story, how you personally can tell stories. Because if you're not the type to be able to think the long game of a single form narrative, maybe it's not necessarily for you. Maybe go to the multiform narrative.
Yeah.
Or if you really like the idea of like every week I want to do a different thing, or each adventure I want to do a completely different thing, from political intrigue to outright horror. Maybe that's Sandbox allow you to be that flexibility. And
also think about the group that you have.
Yeah.
If you're just getting into D&D and you're not really sure what to do, what media does your group like to watch? Are they like Star Wars fans? Are they Star Trek fans? Do they love Lord of the Rings? Generally the things that they gravitate towards or have expressed interest in, you can model your storylines after that by following some of these narrative guidelines here.
Exactly. It's a huge way to help us. Take a little survey of their favorite works of fiction, and that can really help you inform what kind of story they want to experience.
Or make them listen to this podcast so they can idea what they like, and then they can,
Definitely
leave a comment on here about how much they appreciate it.
And then they can rate and review us.
There you
Perfect.
go. Yeah.
Shameless plug.
How do you like that segue?
Nice meme.
No Segway has that much power, just wheel tires.
Yeah.
Apparently you haven't seen
he
people
just has
fall
a
off of
speaker
them.
on there. They can play this tire squeaking thing whenever he turns the Segway in.
That's my Segway horn. Is the whole rev up and just so that way when I stop, it took practice to time it.
Nerd.
Yeah.
All right, why don't you read us out?
All right. Well, that's where we're gonna end it today. If you guys have any questions about this topic or any others that we've covered, or suggestions for future topics, or hell, any question at all, please feel free to email us or tweet us at Matt. Where can they tweet us at or email us at?
They can email us at wizardscouncilpod@gmail.com.
That's Gmail, GMAIL.com.
BINGO.com.
And Abe, where can they tweet us at?
At WizardsPod.
All right.
Nice. So, until our next meeting, may Aron favor your dice and watch over your dead heroes. Bye!
Bye.
Bye.
God. He's been possessed! Run!
This place is haunted! Go! Run!
Hello, Matt here. Thanks for joining today's session. If you like the Wizards Council, please leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts from. This helps other wonderful people like yourself find us. All right, Red Warrior needs food badly. Till next time. Peace.